Listen, there was a trail register on a path padlocked shut for 11 days, and the last entry, dated that morning, was signed with a name belonging to a hiker who had been missing for 8 months. The register was a standard NPS logbook, zip-tied to a post, pen still clipped to the cover. The ink was fresh. The date was correct. The padlock had not been touched. Ranger Della Marsh found it, transferred out of that district 3 weeks later, and never went back to that trail. Nobody has explained how that entry got there. To understand what she found, you have to go back to the morning she drove up that fire road with a thermos of bad coffee and a clipboard, thinking it was just a routine gate check. The fire road was one she had driven 40-something times. She knew the sound the gravel made under her tires at the first curve, the way the hemlocks closed in tight on both sides until the road leveled out near the gate, the exact spot where her radio lost 1 bar and she'd get it back again on the way down. 8 months earlier, a hiker named Marcus Vole had gone up that trail and not come back. Search teams had worked it for 9 days. They found his car at the trailhead. They found nothing else. The case was still open. District policy required the trail to remain chained until the case reached resolution, which, as far as anyone could tell, was going to be a while. Della had been doing the gate check since the closure. It was not a glamorous assignment. She initialed a sheet, checked the chain and the padlock, noted the date and time, drove back. She had done it 11 times. The chain was always correct. The register, which hung on its post 20 feet past the gate on the trail side, was always dry and untouched. The last legitimate entry in it was the day before closure. A couple from Ohio who had hiked the lower loop and wrote that the rhododendrons were starting to come in. That morning, she parked at the gravel turnout, left her coffee on the seat, and walked to the gate with her clipboard. The padlock was closed. The chain was looped the way she had left it. She checked both with her hands out of habit, even though she could see from the turnout that nothing had been disturbed. She was already thinking about the culvert report she needed to file when she noticed the mud, on the concrete base of the gate post, on the trail side. A single impression, a partial boot shape pressed into mud that had collected in a low joint of the concrete. It was inside the gate. Not on the roadside where she was standing, but on the other side, where the trail began. She stood there for a moment. It could have been an animal. A deer walking through the gate gap, which was narrow but not impossible for a yearling. Could have been old mud shifted by rain, could have been nothing. She told herself all of this and almost believed it. Then she looked at the register. The cover was open. Not lying flat open, not blown back, but slightly fanned, the way pages move when someone has just touched them and the air has barely settled. The pen was still clipped to the cover, but it was clipped at an angle it had not been before. She knew that pen. She had looked at it 11 times. 20 feet was not far. She could see the register clearly through the gap in the gate. The top page had writing on it. She stood there longer than she should have. The forest on both sides of the gate was completely quiet. Not the ordinary quiet of an early morning in the mountains, but the specific absence of sound that she later described as the whole thing holding its breath. No birds, no wind moving in the hemlocks. Nothing. The only sound was the faint creak of the gate chain where it rested against the post. The trail had been closed for 11 days. She had personally verified the register was blank after the last legitimate entry. She had photographed it on the second inspection as part of her protocol documentation. She radioed dispatch, told them she was unlocking the gate for an interior inspection, got her acknowledgement. The radio crackled twice, which was normal for that hollow, and then she pulled the key from her jacket pocket and opened the padlock. She walked to the register post. She did not look up the trail. She kept her eyes on the logbook. She unclipped the pen. She turned the cover back fully. The top page was dated correctly, today's date, in the small box at the top of the entry line where hikers recorded their start time and weather. In the name field, written in careful, unhurried capital letters, Marcus Vole. In the destination field, back down. No time listed, no weather noted. The handwriting was neat. It was the handwriting of someone who had not been in any hurry. Della had seen Marcus Vole's signature once, in the original missing person file the district had shared with rangers involved in the search. She was not a handwriting analyst. She could not say with certainty that the entry was his, but she could say that it looked like what she remembered. She turned the register over in her hands. The paper was dry. The ink did not smear when she pressed lightly near the entry. It was not fresh in the sense of wet. It had dried, but it was not aged or faded. Someone had written in this register since her last inspection. She radioed dispatch again. She noted the entry. Her voice was level. She described what she was holding. Dispatch asked her to repeat the name. She did. The radio crackled and went silent for a moment that was longer than interference usually explains. She had not yet looked up the trail. She was standing with the open register in one hand and the radio in the other, and she became aware that she had been looking at the page for a long time without actually deciding what to do next. She looked up. The trail was empty. It ran straight for about 40 yards before the first bend. The soil on both sides of the path was soft from recent rain. The hemlocks pressed close. She could see all the way to the bend. Nothing was there. But on the trail surface between her and the bend, she could see the boot prints. Fresh, clear, deep-treaded, pressed into the soft earth. They led away from the register post toward the bend in single file. They led only one direction. There were no prints coming back. The district supervisor arrived 53 minutes after Della's call. His name was Gerald Hatch, and he had worked that district for 19 years. He pulled up to the gravel turnout in a Green Forest Service pickup, got out without hurrying, and walked to where Della was standing at the gate. She handed him the register. He read the entry once. He did not read it again. He had the same expression she had seen on older rangers when something did not fit the available categories. Not disbelief, not alarm, but a careful, closed-down look, like a door being shut very quietly from the inside. She noticed it and filed it away. They walked the trail together to the first bend. The boot prints were clear and consistent. Size 11, deep lug sole, the kind of tread a serious hiker uses, not a weekend boot. The prints tracked straight down the center of the path. Each one pressed to the same depth, at the same stride interval. Della photographed every one of them. At the bend, the trail curved left and descended slightly before rising again toward the first ridge. Past the bend, the surface changed, 40 feet of exposed root and flat stone, a section where the trail crossed a natural shelf of bedrock. The prints stopped at the stone. Clean stops, the front edge of the last print pressing firmly into the soft soil at the rock's edge, as if the person had stepped deliberately onto the stone and kept walking. On the other side, where the trail returned to soft earth, there was nothing. No prints in either direction. The soil beyond the rock shelf was undisturbed, covered in a faint rime of dried leaf material that would have shown any compression at all. No one had walked through it. Hatch stood at the edge of the rock shelf for a moment without speaking. Then he called in a search team. 2 rangers swept the trail to the first ridge over the next 2 hours. They found no person, no gear, no further evidence of presence. They noted the prints, confirmed the absence of prints past the rock shelf, and returned to the gate. The official language in the subsequent report described the event as a possible unauthorized entry by an unknown individual using a known missing person's name. A determination that covered the facts without explaining any of them. Hatch pulled Della aside before he left. He said it quietly, the way someone says something they have already thought about more than once. Next time you find something you can't explain on a closed trail, you radio it in and you wait at the gate. You don't walk up. He did not look at her while he said it. He was looking at the trail register, which was now sealed in an evidence bag under his arm. She almost asked him what he meant by next time. She didn't. She relocked the gate alone. The search team had already driven out. Hatch's truck was gone. The gravel turnout was empty, and the afternoon light was going flat in the way it does in a deep hollow when the sun drops behind the ridge before it has any right to. She looped the chain, clicked the padlock shut, and stood there for a moment with her hand still on the lock. She did not look up the trail. She drove back to the ranger station, filed her inspection report, noted the entry and the prints in the incident log. She wrote clearly and specifically. She did not speculate in the report. That was not what the form was for. That evening, in her truck in the parking lot of her apartment building, she pulled up the original missing person file on her work tablet. It took her 3 minutes to find what she was looking for. Marcus Voll's gear inventory recorded the day his car was found at the trailhead. Boots, size 11, deep lug sole, Vasquez brand, 1 pair. She sat with that for a while. She went back to check the photographs she had taken at the trail. The boot print photos were good, well lit, clearly detailed, close enough to show the tread pattern. She went through them in order, from the first print near the register post to the last one at the rock shelf's edge. The final image before the rock was clear. She could see the tread, the depth, the direction of travel. She scrolled back to the first photograph, the one she had taken closest to the register post where the prints began. The soil beside the post was smooth, completely undisturbed. She zoomed in until the image pixelated slightly, looking for compression, for any sign of where the prints originated. There was nothing. The first clear print appeared 4 feet from the post. Between the post and that first print, the soil showed no trace of the contact at all. She set the tablet face down on the passenger seat. 4 feet, as if whoever made the prints had not walked to the starting point. As if they had simply started there, fully formed, and walked away. The boot prints began from nothing and ended at rock. They came from a man whose case was still open. They were in a register on a trail where no one had a key. She submitted her transfer request 3 weeks later. The district approved it in 4 days. Gerald Hatch signed off on it without a conversation. The trail register had been collected as evidence and logged correctly at the district office. Standard procedure. The evidence clerk opened the bag on a Tuesday afternoon and reached in for the relevant page to begin the documentation. The page was blank. Not torn out, not damaged, not water-stained. Blank. The ink was gone. The entry that Della had read, photographed, and dictated over the radio was not there. The evidence log recorded the discrepancy in 1 line and moved on. Nobody flagged it for further investigation. The trail remained closed. The case remained open. The photographs Della had taken of the register entry, the close-up images showing the date box, the name field, the neat capital letters, were on her work tablet, which she returned when she transferred. What happened to those images after that was not something she was told. That was the part that stayed with her, she told the person she eventually shared the account with. Not the prints, not even the entry. The part that stayed with her was simpler than that. She had stood at the gate and relocked it alone. and the forest had been completely silent, and somewhere up that trail were boot prints that started from nothing. And the thing she could not stop thinking about, the thing that followed her out of that district and into the next one, and into every gate check she did for years afterward, was that the entry had said coming back down, not lost, not help, not any of the things a missing person writes. Coming back down, like a plan, like a statement of fact. Some accounts stay unresolved because the evidence disappears. Some stay unresolved because no one looks hard enough. Della's account is different. The evidence was there. 2 people read it. 1 photographed it. And then, in a locked evidence bag in a district office, it was simply gone. What rangers across the southern Appalachians have said, in formal reports and in conversation, and in one case in a recorded deposition, is that the moment a radio cuts to static in those mountains is rarely random. The next account came from a seasonal employee who learned that the hard way, alone on a fire road, the night something on a dead frequency said her name. The following account was submitted anonymously to a ranger support forum in the spring of 2020. The author identified themselves only as a former seasonal employee who had worked a district in the Cherokee National Forest during the 2019 field season. The post has since been deleted, but a copy was preserved and eventually shared with the person who compiled these accounts. The submission is presented here with minor edits for clarity. The author's name has never been confirmed. Anissa Cole did not consider herself someone who scared easily. She had grown up in a rural county in East Tennessee, had been hiking since she was old enough to follow her father up a ridgeline, and had applied for the seasonal ranger position because she genuinely liked being alone in the mountains at night. That was not a common preference. It served her well on the overnight maintenance shifts, which most of the other seasonals quietly tried to avoid. The shift in question was a standard storm damage survey. Heavy rain 2 days prior had washed debris across several sections of fire road above the valley, and the district needed someone to drive the route, document the damage, and flag anything that needed a crew. Anissa took it without being asked. She signed out a maintenance vehicle just after 9 in the evening, loaded her clipboard, her thermos, and her radio, and drove up the mountain. The fire road climbed for about 4 miles before leveling out along the ridge. She had driven it a dozen times. The headlights picked up the gravel clean and white ahead of her. The tree line pushing close on both sides. The occasional glint of a reflective boundary marker in the brush. She worked slowly, stopping to note washouts, flagging 2 sections where the road surface had eroded enough to need attention. The thermos coffee was already cold. The radio was on, set to the main operational channel, giving her the low background of occasional district traffic, and the comfortable knowledge that she was not completely out of contact. She knew the frequencies on the unit she had signed out: main channel, secondary, and channel 4, which her supervisor had mentioned during orientation as a legacy frequency the district had retired in 2013. Old infrastructure, he had said. They kept it on the dial for historical continuity reasons that nobody had gotten around to resolving administratively. There was never any traffic on it. There hadn't been for 6 years. At approximately 11:15, her radio produced static on channel 4. She looked at the unit. The channel indicator was showing 4, which made no sense because she had not touched the channel selector. She had set it to main and left it there. She checked the selector. It was on main. The static was coming through on main. She turned the volume down slightly and kept driving. Crossed signals happened in mountain terrain. Old frequencies bled through sometimes when the atmospheric conditions were right. It was annoying, but not unusual. The static faded after about 30 seconds. She turned the volume back up. 11 minutes later, it returned. This time, she caught it right as it started, and she listened more carefully. It was not clean static. There was something underneath it, a pattern of sound that was almost but not quite random. She could hear syllables without being able to resolve them into words. She turned the volume up. The sound was like someone speaking from the far end of a long hallway with a door between them, the consonants sheared off, the vowels running together into something that felt like a language without being language. She switched the radio off. The fog had come down while she was driving. She had not noticed it building, but now it was sitting in the low sections of the road, her headlights cutting into it and losing depth, the tree line disappearing into gray above 10 feet. The road ahead showed her maybe 30 feet before the fog took it. She needed the next wide turnout to reverse the vehicle and head back, and the nearest one was still a mile up the road. The shoulder on both sides was soft and uncertain. She kept driving. She turned the radio back on after 5 minutes. She needed it on for safety. She checked the main channel. Clear, a burst of traffic from a crew checking in on the far side of the district. Normal sounds. She left it there. At 11:47, Channel 4 came through clearly. Not static this time. A voice, clean enough to understand, slightly degraded the way a transmission degrades over distance, but clear enough that she heard every word. The voice read a trail coordinate, grid reference, elevation marker, the format used in Ranger radio protocol. She recognized the format immediately. She also recognized the coordinate. It was the turnout she was driving toward, the wide gravel pullout at the mile mark where she planned to reverse the vehicle. She was approximately 800 feet from it. She did not touch the radio. She kept both hands on the wheel. Her foot eased off the accelerator slightly without her telling it to. Then the voice said her name. Her full name. First and last, in the same flat, informational tone that a dispatcher uses when identifying a unit. Not a question, not a greeting, a statement. As if someone on the other end of a channel that had been dead for 6 years was simply confirming her location. She did not answer. She drove the remaining 800 feet to the turnout, in a silence that she later described as the loudest she had ever heard. She did not look at the radio. She looked at the road. When the turnout appeared in her headlights, she pulled in, executed the 3-point turn with the careful deliberateness of someone who is concentrating on the mechanics of a task rather than anything else, and drove back down the mountain without stopping. She did not turn the radio off. She did not turn the volume down. She let it run on main channel with its ordinary traffic and its comfortable noise, and she drove. She said nothing about it that night. The next morning, she went to the ranger station early, before her supervisor arrived, and she checked the radio log. The log recorded all transmissions on all active channels by timestamp. She found her check-in from the start of the shift. She found the crew transmission she had heard on the far side of the district. She found the end-of-shift log entry. At 11:47, there was a blank line. Not a gap, not a formatting error. A line with a timestamp and nothing after it. The adjacent entries were complete. That one was not. She showed it to her supervisor when he came in. He looked at it for a moment and said what she had expected him to say. Equipment glitch, log formatting error, old frequency interference. He was not dismissive about it. He was genuinely trying to be helpful. She asked about Channel 4, about how a transmission could come through on a frequency the district had retired. He explained that passive interference was possible, that old frequencies could bleed through under the right atmospheric conditions. She asked whether passive interference could produce a clear voice transmission with correct radio protocol format. He did not answer that directly. He said he would look into it. She asked about the transmitter hardware. She had been curious enough that morning to read the technical documentation on the radio unit she had signed out. Channel 4, according to the documentation, required a physical activation switch on the transmitter board to broadcast. That switch was kept in a locked equipment cabinet at the station. It could not broadcast passively. To use Channel 4, someone would have had to open the cabinet, activate the switch, and transmit deliberately. Her supervisor looked at the log entry again. Then he looked at her. He said he would look into it. He said it the same way he had said it the first time. She put in for a reassignment to a different district the following week. The request was approved in 2 days. Her supervisor signed off on it without asking why. She has not worked an overnight shift on that fire road since. She said in her submission that she did not think about the coordinate anymore, or about how the voice had known where she was going before she arrived. What she thought about was simpler than that. The transmitter switch was in a locked cabinet. Passive interference cannot explain a clear transmission. Someone had to have opened that cabinet and activated it deliberately at 11:47 at night, while she was alone on the road above them. She did not know who that someone was. She said she had stopped trying to figure it out. The detail that bothered her was not the coordinate, and it was not even her name. It was the tone. Whatever had spoken had used the flat, professional register of someone reading information. No urgency, no malice, just her name, stated plainly, the way you confirm a fact you already know. Some accounts are about what rangers find. Some are about what they hear. The next one, told by a man who has since passed, is about what a ranger saw standing very still at the bend of a closed trail, and what it left behind in the ash. Joel Abbott worked as a park ranger for 24 years in a district in southwestern Virginia. He was, by every account from people who knew him, a practical man. He hunted whitetail every November, went to the same church he had attended since childhood, and was known among the rangers he worked with as someone who did not exaggerate and did not complain. His daughter, whose name has been withheld at her request, recorded him telling this story in 2019, 2 years before he passed. She submitted the transcript anonymously. She said he told it only twice in his life, and that the second time he did not cry, but he did not speak for a long while after he finished. The trail had been closed for 3 weeks when Joel drove up to check it that night. The closure followed the deaths of 2 backpackers, men in their late 20s, experienced hikers, fully equipped, who had been found on the trail by a search team after failing to return from a planned overnight trip. The cause of death was ruled exposure. The families disputed the ruling. The weather the night in question had been cold, but not severe. Certainly not severe enough to account for 2 properly geared adults dying within 100 yards of each other on a trail they had hiked before. Joel had been on the discovery team. He was one of the 2 rangers who reached the bodies first. He never talked about what the scene looked like, not even to his daughter. What he did say was that the exposure ruling had always bothered him, and that he did not think the families were wrong to push back. The closure was standard procedure pending review. The trail was gated. Joel had been on the rotation checking it. The call that brought him out that particular night came from a man driving on the valley road below. He had seen lights on the closed trail. Not flashlights, lights, plural, the way you see a fire through trees, an orange flicker that comes and goes between trunks. He had pulled over and watched for a few minutes before calling it in. He was a local, and he knew the trail was supposed to be closed, which was why he called. Joel thanked him and drove up. He parked at the trailhead gate, clipped his flashlight to his belt, and unlocked the chain. He had a good flashlight, not the weak department issue kind, but a personal one he had carried for 15 years that threw a hard beam 60 feet and did not ask much of the batteries. He walked in. The first thing he noticed was the smell. He caught it at the first switchback, about 150 yards in. Campfire smoke, dry and woody, the kind that comes from a fire that has been burning long enough to work through the initial green wood phase and settle into clean combustion. Not a wildfire smell, not wet brush burning, but a controlled fire built by someone who knew what they were doing. He told himself it was teenagers. Local kids who ignored the closure signs for exactly the reason kids ignore closure signs, because ignoring them is the point. It irritated him, but it did not alarm him. The fire was burning in the flat camping area at the 400-yard mark. He came around the last small rise before the flat and saw it. A proper campfire, built in a stone ring, burning at full steady output. The orange light reached the near trees and stopped. Beyond the fire, the trail rose into darkness. Joel stood at the edge of the flat and swept his flashlight across the site. The camp was completely empty. No packs, no gear, no sleeping equipment, no food bags, no water bottles, no clothing draped on branches. Nothing that anyone who hiked in to build a fire would have brought with them. Just the fire, burning on its own in the ring, as if whoever had built it had walked away to do something and would be back shortly. He walked to the ring and crouched beside it. The coal bed was deep and dark, glowing in the consistent way coals glow after hours of sustained burning. He pressed the back of his hand near the edge, not close enough to burn, just close enough to feel. The heat was significant. This fire had been going for at least 2 hours, possibly more. He stood and looked at the stone ring itself. He had worked this trail for more than 20 years. He had walked this flat camping area in every season, in every kind of weather, and he had never seen this ring. It was not a new construction. The stones were blackened deep, stained from many previous fires, mortared in place by years of ash and use. It was old. It had been here for a long time. And Joel Abbott, who knew this trail the way he knew the roads around his house, had never once seen it. He radioed dispatch. He reported an unauthorized fire, described the location, noted that no persons were present, noted the absence of gear and footprints. He said he was going to check further up the trail. As he waited for dispatch to acknowledge, he heard something from above. He said it was not a voice. It was not an animal. It was a sound he knew. The specific sound of someone setting a heavy pack down on a trail surface. A soft, controlled compression, the rustle of fabric settling, the faint click of a frame hitting ground. He had made that sound himself hundreds of times. He knew it exactly. It came from above the flat, up the trail, maybe 50 yards. Once, then nothing. Dispatch acknowledged. Joel called out his standard identification, Ranger, District. He needed whoever was up there to make themselves known. His voice went up the trail, and the forest took it and did not return it. He waited. He counted to 30. Nothing moved. Nothing answered. The fire burned behind him with the patient consistency of something that had been burning since before he arrived and did not intend to stop. He started up the trail. The path narrowed above the flat, the hemlocks pressing close on both sides, the flashlight beam pushing into the dark ahead. He moved carefully. The soil was soft enough from recent rain that his own boots pressed quietly, and he listened as he walked, parsing the sounds of his movement from anything else that might be moving with him. There was nothing. The forest above the flat was entirely silent in the way mountain forest goes silent when something has recently passed through it, and the smaller things are still deciding whether to breathe again. He had been walking for about 2 minutes when his flashlight reached the next bend in the trail. There was a figure at the bend, standing still, facing away from him, not moving. Dark clothing, or dark enough that the flashlight did not pull detail from it at this distance. The right height for a person, the right general shape. Standing with a quality of stillness that was not the stillness of someone who had not heard him coming. It was the stillness of someone who had heard him and had decided to stand exactly where they were. Joel called out again, full voice, identified himself, told them to turn around and show their hands. The figure did not move. He took 3 steps forward. He closed the distance to 20 feet before he stopped again. The figure had not moved, had not shifted weight, had not turned its head, had not changed its quality of stillness in any way that Joel could detect. It was simply there, at the bend, facing the upper trail, the way a person stands when they are looking at something ahead of them that they are not ready to leave yet. Joel's flashlight was full on it. The light hit the back of it and told him nothing useful. Dark jacket or dark shirt, no pack, no visible gear, the right height, the right proportions. He was 20 feet away. He called out one more time. The figure stepped off the trail. Not quickly, not in the crashing, panicked way that someone bolts when they have been caught somewhere they should not be. It moved with the unhurried, deliberate quality of someone who had been expecting this moment and had already decided how to handle it. 1 step left, into the tree line, and the hemlocks closed around it, and it was gone. Joel put his flashlight beam into the trees immediately. He swept it left, right, forward, into the dark between trunks. The beam reached 15, maybe 20 feet into the forest before the trees took it. He saw nothing. No movement, no retreating shape, no reflected eyeshine. The undergrowth between the hemlocks was dense enough that a person moving through it should have been audible. Branches displaced, leaves compressed underfoot, something. There was no sound at all. He stood at the bend for a while longer than he probably should have. Then he turned around and went back down. The fire was still burning when he passed the flat. He put it out the way protocol required. Water from the 2 bottles in his pack poured slowly onto the coal bed, the hiss and steam of it filling the clearing, while his flashlight sat propped against a rock pointing upward. The coal bed was so deep that it took both bottles and more time than he expected. He estimated afterward that the fire had been burning for 4 hours minimum, which meant it had been started before 7 in the evening, before full dark. Whoever had built it in daylight, and then had been here in this clearing for hours before Joel arrived. He did not find any footprints around the ring. The soil around the flat camping area was soft, the same soft soil that had accepted his own boot impressions cleanly as he walked. Around the fire ring, in every direction, the soil was undisturbed. He checked with his flashlight on his knees, looking across the surface at a low angle, the way you check for prints when you need to be sure. Nothing. No impressions leading toward the ring, none leading away. He filed his report in the morning. Unauthorized fire. Stone ring of unknown origin at the flat camping area. No persons located. No gear found. No prints. The second ranger who came up with him at first light confirmed everything. They photographed the ring. The coal bed was logged and measured. District office noted the ring as a previously unrecorded informal feature, common enough in older trail systems, and filed the photographs. The second ranger commented on the prints. He said it the way someone says something they are not sure they want in the record, quietly, as an observation rather than a finding. Joel wrote it down anyway, in his personal log rather than the official report. He pulled historical maps that week. He contacted the district's records office. He went back through trail documentation to the earliest surveys on file, which dated to the early 1960s. The stone ring did not appear in any of them. No maintenance record, no trail description, no informal note. He called a county historian, a retired schoolteacher who had spent 30 years compiling local land records. The historian mentioned a small logging camp that had operated near that trail section in the early part of the 20th century. No surviving structures, no detailed records of its layout. It was the closest thing to an explanation that Joel ever found. What he did not put in his official report was the insole. He found it at the edge of the fire ring when he was helping the second ranger document the site in the morning light. Partially buried in ash, positioned at the ring's interior edge as if it had been placed there rather than dropped. It was badly burned around the perimeter, the edges curled and blackened, the material of it shrunken and distorted, but the center was intact enough to read. A boot insole, the kind that comes fitted inside a hiking boot and gets replaced after heavy use. Stamped on the interior surface in the manufacturer's standard format, brand name, size, and a faded secondary label that had been added by hand with a permanent marker. A name. First initial and last name, the way a careful hiker labels gear before a long trip. Joel recognized the brand. Size 11. He stood in the cold morning light with the insole in his gloved hand and looked at it for a long time. He went back to the office and pulled the gear inventory from the file on the 2 hikers who had died on this trail 3 weeks earlier. The inventory had been compiled the day their vehicle was found at the trailhead. Both men had been fully equipped. The list was detailed. One of them had been wearing size 11 boots, the same brand. The inventory noted a replacement insole, the aftermarket kind, added for arch support, with a hand-labeled size marking. Joel sat with that for a while. The official explanation would have been coincidence. The insole could have been left by a previous visitor, kicked under the ring's edge by an animal, buried there by any number of ordinary processes. The trail had seen hundreds of hikers. A discarded insole was not inherently remarkable. He knew this. He had told himself this several times by the time he finished reading the inventory. But the trail had been searched after the deaths. Thoroughly. The flat camping area had been documented. A fire ring of this size, in this location, would have been noted. It had not been noted because it had not been there. And an insole sitting at the ring's edge, in the ash, had not been there 3 weeks ago either. He wrapped it in a plastic evidence bag from his kit. He did not log it. He put it in the glove box of his truck. He kept it there for several months. He did not discuss it with anyone at the district. He did not file an amended report. He told his daughter later that he was not sure what filing it would have accomplished, and that he was not sure he wanted to find out. Eventually, he drove to the address he had for one of the deceased hikers' families, a drive of about 2 hours, and he left the evidence bag in their mailbox. He did not knock on the door. He did not leave a note. He drove home. He never returned to the closed trail alone after dark for the remainder of his career. His daughter finished the account with what he had said the first time he told it, the time he had cried at the end. She said he had been quiet for a long time after the story, and then he had looked at her and said, whatever it was, it knew those boys. It had something of theirs. The second time he told it, he did not cry. He sat in his kitchen and looked at his hands and did not say anything for a while. His daughter asked him if he had ever understood what the figure was, whether it had been a person, a local, someone connected to the hikers. He said he had thought about it for 20 years. He said there was one thing he had never been able to get past. The figure had not run when he approached. It had not hidden. It had stepped off the trail the way you step out of someone's way in a hallway, without urgency, without alarm, with the particular patience of something that had been there long before he arrived and would be there long after he left. That, he said, was what he kept thinking about. Not the fire, and not the insole, the patience of it. Some accounts focus on what rangers see, others on what they find. One account is about something a ranger almost touched, an object locked inside a box on a trail where no one should have been, with a note at the bottom that gave exactly one piece of advice. This account comes from a family member, specifically the younger sister of a ranger who worked a backcountry campsite maintenance circuit in Great Smoky Mountains National Park for 6 years. She submitted it on his behalf, with his knowledge, through a contact who collects accounts from Park Service employees and former employees. He reviewed the submission before it was sent. He made 2 corrections, both minor, both related to trail distances. He did not change anything about the bear box. His name does not appear in the account. His sister said he stopped talking about it after the first year, not because it stopped bothering him, but because he had run out of ways to explain it that did not sound like something other than what it was. The maintenance circuit he worked was a standard backcountry rotation, a set of designated campsites reached by trail, each requiring periodic attention. He checked logbooks, collected trash, tested tent platform integrity, restocked small first aid stations on assigned posts, and inspected bear boxes. Bear boxes are the heavy steel food storage containers bolted to posts at backcountry sites, designed to keep food secured from wildlife. They open with a specific rotation sequence, a series of quarter turns on a recessed latch, the sequence printed on a small laminated card affixed to the lid. Different boxes have different sequences. It is not complicated, but it is specific enough that you cannot open a box by accident or by guessing. The site in question was 2 miles from the nearest trailhead, a pleasant hike in good weather, longer in mud. He had been to this site 11 times over 2 seasons. He knew the box on that post. He knew its sequence. It was a Tuesday in late October, clear and cold, the leaves mostly down, the trail visible for long distances through the bare understory. He signed out at the trailhead, noted the time, and hiked in. He reached the site in just under 40 minutes. He checked the logbook first. The site had last been occupied 6 days prior by a party of 2. A couple, last name noted in the logbook, departure date confirmed. He had no reason to think anything was unusual. He checked the tent platforms, both sound. He checked the fire ring, clean. He picked up a piece of foil someone had left near the ring's edge and pocketed it. Then he went to the bear box. The latch was engaged in the locked position. This was immediately wrong. Departing campers are told to leave bear boxes open and empty. A locked box almost always means someone forgot to clean it out, food left inside, which is both a regulation violation and a practical problem. He had dealt with this before. He pulled out his copy of the sequence card for this box and opened it. The box was full. A stuffed sack containing a small backpacking stove and 2 fuel canisters. A food bag, sealed, with the drawstring cinched. A headlamp, the compact kind, with the elastic band coiled around it. A single glove, right hand, fleece, gray. And at the bottom, underneath everything else, a piece of paper folded in quarters. He set his pack down and photographed the contents before touching anything. Then he radioed the station. The station pulled the reservation record for the site. The couple had departed 6 days ago. Their vehicle had been confirmed gone from the trailhead lot. Standard practice for backcountry checkouts included a follow-up call to confirm the party was home safe. That call had been made 5 days ago. Both members of the party had been reached at their home number. They were fine. He looked at the gear in the box. Gear belonging to people who had been home for 5 days was sitting in a locked bear box on a trail 2 miles from the nearest trailhead. The box had been locked correctly, with the proper sequence from the outside. He unfolded the piece of paper. The handwriting was clear and unhurried. The letters formed carefully, the paper slightly soft from the cold but otherwise undamaged. It said, "If you find this, don't stay past dark." He read it twice. He looked at the time on his watch. It was just after 2 in the afternoon. He had approximately 3.5 hours of usable daylight. He did not sit down to eat the lunch he had packed, which was his habit at this site, because the view from the tent platform on the north end was particularly good in the fall. He photographed the note. He bagged the gear. He logged everything on his clipboard with the specificity that his training required: item descriptions, condition, location within the box identification number, time of discovery. He did it carefully, and he did it faster than usual. The station contacted the couple after his call. They confirmed the gear. The woman confirmed the headlamp specifically. She remembered packing it into her bag because she had needed it in the car on the drive home to find something in the back seat, and she specifically remembered the moment of taking it out of her pack. She could not explain how it had returned to a locked box on a trail 2 miles from where she had parked. The official explanation was a reasonable one, as official explanations go. An unknown third party had found dropped gear on the trail. Perhaps the couple had lost items during their hike out and had placed it in the bear box as a courtesy, locking it for security. Good Samaritan behavior. It happened occasionally. Hikers found gear and secured it properly rather than leaving it on a trail. The note was attributed to the same unknown person. A local who knew the area, perhaps? Someone with enough trail experience to recognize the value of leaving found gear secure. The explanation covered the facts. Almost. The bear box had been locked. Properly locked, with the correct rotation sequence completed in the correct order. That sequence was printed on a laminated card affixed to the lid, visible when the box was open. To lock the box from the outside, a person would need to open it first, place the gear inside, and then engage the latch using the printed sequence. Meaning, the sequence was available to anyone who opened the box. Meaning, the locking itself was not evidence of special knowledge, but it was evidence of intention. A good Samaritan who found dropped gear and wanted to secure it would have had to make a series of deliberate choices. Find the gear, hike 2 miles off trail or on trail to this specific site, open the box, place the items inside in a specific arrangement, fold a note, and place it at the bottom beneath the other items. Engage the lock and leave. Without signing the logbook. Without leaving any other trace. He checked the logbook again before he left. No entry between the couple's departure 6 days ago and his arrival that morning. He thought about the note on the walkout. He thought about the phrasing of it. Not a warning about bears, not a note about the gear, not an explanation of any kind. Just a conditional sentence. If you find this. As if whoever wrote it knew that the note might sit there for a while. As if they were not certain who would open the box, only that someone eventually would. Don't stay past dark, not don't leave your food out, not close the box when you're done. Don't stay past dark. He reached the trailhead with about 2 hours of daylight left. He sat in his truck for a few minutes before driving out. The trail entrance was visible from where he was parked, the first 100 yards of it clear before the trees tightened and it curved away. He looked at it for a moment. Then he started the truck and left. He still does the circuit. He told his sister he has not thought about stopping because it is his job and he is good at it, and one strange afternoon does not change that. What has changed, without his planning for it to change, is that he moves faster at that site than at any other on his rotation. He finishes earlier. He does not sit on the north platform to eat his lunch anymore. He still has the photograph of the note on his phone. His sister asked him once why he kept it. He said he wanted to remember that he had left when it told him to. What he did not say, and what his sister included in her submission because she felt it mattered, was the one question she had asked that he had not answered. She had asked him whether the note bothered him more as a warning or as proof proof that whoever had put it there had known someone would come, had known they would open the box, had known the sequence, had known this site, had planned for the possibility that the person reading it might be inclined to stay. He had thought about it for a long time. He said it was both. That was the part he couldn't put down. Some accounts are about what happens in the dark. One account, told by a man who has driven county roads for 30 years and never once gotten lost, is about a road that should have been 2 miles long and took 40 minutes to drive, and about the sign he found at a fork that had no right to exist. Earl Denton spent 30 years working for the county road department in eastern Kentucky. He knows every named and unnamed road in his county, the way most people know the layout of their own houses, by feel, by sound, by the particular way a road behaves in wet weather versus dry. He has driven every logging spur, every coal haul road, every service road that connects one county route to another across the ridges. He drove them in trucks, in maintenance vehicles, in his own pickup on weekends when he was checking on something that needed attention before Monday. He does not get lost. He has never gotten lost. That is not a boast. It is simply a fact about a man who spent 3 decades learning a landscape from the inside. He told this account at a community meeting in 2018 in response to a discussion about road safety on rural routes after dark. A local historian recorded it with his permission. He has told it consistently for nearly 20 years, and in those 20 years he has not changed a single detail. The road in question is a logging-era service road that crosses a low ridge between 2 county routes. 2 miles long, gravel surface, maintained by the county for access purposes. It has a name on the county map, a number designation rather than a proper name, the way most service roads are labeled, and it has been in continuous use since it was cut sometime in the mid-20th century. Earl had driven it more times than he could count. The night it went wrong was a Tuesday in October, the same week as the heavy rain that had come through and left standing water on the lower roads. Earl was doing a post-storm damage survey. Standard practice after significant rain, checking culverts for blockage, noting any surface erosion that needed attention before it got worse. He had done this survey on this road a dozen times following previous storms. He turned onto the service road from the county route just after 5:30 in the evening. Still light, but the kind of late afternoon October light that gives you maybe 40 minutes before it starts going gray. He had his headlights off. He had his clipboard on the seat beside him, his coffee in the cup holder going cold, his radio on. The surface was soft from the rain but passable. He had driven worse. The hemlocks on both sides pressed in close the way they always did on this road, and the road began its modest climb toward the ridge. He noticed the grade first. About 10 minutes in, the road was climbing more steeply than it should have been. Not dramatically, not a cliff, not a switchback, but a sustained grade that did not match his memory of this road's profile. He knew this road. It had a gentle rise over the first half mile and then leveled before the descent on the other side. What he was driving was not gentle. He was in second gear when he should have been in third. He told himself the storm had changed things. Heavy rain can reshape a gravel surface, can deposit material that alters the feel of a grade, can wash the road into contours it did not have before. He had seen it happen. He noted it on his clipboard and kept driving. 15 minutes in, he reached the midpoint. The midpoint of this road, every time Earl had driven it, was marked by a small wooden bridge, 12 feet wide, spanning a drainage ditch. The planks worn smooth but sound. The kind of bridge that rattles slightly when you drive over it, and then is behind you before you have fully registered the sound. He had crossed it so many times that he crossed it without thinking. He was expecting the rattle of it when his headlights, He had turned them on a minute earlier as the light dropped, picked up something different. A concrete bridge, full lane width, properly edged, substantial. And beneath it, where the drainage ditch should have been, a creek. Not a large creek, but a real one, moving fast from the rain, carrying brown water and leaf debris between proper banks. He stopped the truck. He got out and walked to the bridge edge and looked down at the creek. It was real. The water was cold and moving, and making the sound that moving water makes. The bridge was solid beneath his boots, the concrete slightly rough, the edges squared off with the precision of intentional construction. He walked to the other side and back. He knocked on the railing. He went back to his truck and pulled his paper map from the glove box. He unfolded it and found the service road. The map showed the wooden drainage bridge at the correct location. No creek, no concrete structure. He had maps going back 15 years, and none of them showed a creek on this road. He could not turn around. The road was too narrow, the shoulders too soft from the rain, the trees too close on both sides. His only option was to continue to the wide turnaround at the road's end, which was less than a mile ahead. He drove across the bridge. The concrete made a different sound under his tires than the wooden bridge would have. A lower, heavier resonance. 25 minutes in, the turnaround should have appeared. The exit onto the second county route should have been visible. He checked his odometer, 3.8 miles. The road was 2 miles long. He slowed to a near stop and sat for a moment in his truck with the engine idling. The road ahead was visible in his headlights, climbing again, curving slightly left into fog that had started collecting in the low sections. His radio produced static. He tried both channels. Static on each. He remembered something then. A comment from a retired county engineer he had worked with years earlier. A man named Parsley, who had been with the department since the 1970s. They had been discussing this road. Earl could not remember why, some question of maintenance jurisdiction, and Parsley had said, offhand, the way he said most things. That old service road has a branch. Nobody uses it. Don't take the branch. Earl had nodded and not thought about it again. There were no signs of a branch on any map he had seen, and he had never noticed a fork in the road in all the times he had driven it. He had filed Parsley's comment in the part of his memory where he kept information that seemed irrelevant at the time. He drove on. The turnaround had to be close. The exit had to be close. He kept his speed low and his eyes on the road ahead and told himself this was a road he knew, and it was going to end where it was supposed to end. 38 minutes after he had turned onto the service road, his headlights found a fork. He had never seen a fork on this road. He had driven it dozens of times and there had never been a fork. But here it was, the road splitting cleanly, the left fork descending into the fog, the right fork continuing upward. Both tracks showing gravel, both looking maintained, both going somewhere. Between the two forks, on a wooden post that had clearly been standing for a long time, the wood weathered to gray, the base dark with moisture. The post, leaning very slightly to the right, was a sign. Handwritten. Painted letters on a board, the paint faded but legible. He read it once in his headlights and then read it again. Do not take the left fork. No explanation, no date, no name. Just the instruction, painted by someone who had wanted it to last. On a road that Earl Denton had driven for 30 years and had never seen fork before in his life. He sat there with his foot on the brake and his headlights on the sign, and the fog moving slowly past the edge of his beam, and the only sound was his engine and the faint sound of the creek somewhere below him, still moving in the dark. He took the right fork. He did not deliberate long. The sign was there, and it said what it said, and Earl Denton was a practical man who had spent 30 years learning that the people who put signs on rural roads usually had a reason. He did not need to know the reason. He put the truck in gear and took the right fork. The right fork was narrower than the road he had been driving. Older, he thought. The gravel smaller and more compacted. The kind of surface that comes from years of use without significant maintenance. The road finding its own stability through compression rather than fresh material. The trees were closer. He could hear them brushing the side mirrors on both sides. A soft, intermittent sound that he kept expecting to stop, and that did not stop. The road climbed steadily. He stayed in second gear. 6 minutes later, he came out. The road ended at a T-junction with a county route. He pulled out and stopped on the pavement and sat for a moment with his hazards on. He knew this county route. He knew exactly where he was. He was 6 miles north of where he should have been. He sat with that for a moment. 6 miles north meant he had crossed 2 ridgelines and a drainage hollow that his service road did not cross. It meant the road he had been driving had taken him somewhere that required geography the road did not possess. He was in a county he worked in every day of his professional life, and he was 6 miles north of the exit he should have taken, and his odometer said he had driven approximately 7 miles on a road that was 2 miles long. He drove home. He did not stop. He did not call anyone that night. He sat in his kitchen for a while, and then he went to bed, which he said later was a deliberate choice. He did not want to think about it until he had slept, because he trusted his own judgment more after sleep than before it. The next morning, he drove the service road again. Daylight, dry enough, conditions as normal as they ever were on a gravel road in October. He turned in from the county route and drove. The surface was firm. The grade was gentle, exactly the grade he remembered from 30 years of driving it. He reached the midpoint in the time it should have taken. The wooden bridge was there, 12 feet wide, the planks worn smooth. It rattled when he crossed it, a familiar sound. Beneath it, the drainage ditch carried a trickle of post-storm water. No creek, no concrete bridge. He drove to the end of the road in 3 minutes and 20 seconds. He came out on the correct county route, the one on the other side of the ridge, 6 miles south of where he had emerged the previous night. He sat at the exit and checked his odometer. 2.1 miles. He drove back to the midpoint and parked. He got out and walked both sides of the road looking for evidence of a fork. He walked the soft ground on both shoulders, looking for tire tracks other than his own from the morning. The soil had taken his morning tracks cleanly. There were no other tracks in either direction. He drove to the location where the concrete bridge should have been. The drainage ditch was there with its wooden bridge. The soil on both approaches was soft. He could see his own tire impressions from the morning crossing. He could see nothing else. He spent an hour on that road in daylight and found nothing that corresponded to what he had experienced the night before. He contacted the retired county engineer, Parsley, the man who had mentioned the branch. Parsley was in his 80s by then, living in the county seat still sharp. Earl called him and described the night in plain terms. The grade that was wrong, the concrete bridge over the creek, the odometer reading, the fork, the sign. Parsley listened without interrupting, which was unusual for him. When Earl finished, Parsley was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I told every man who worked that road the same thing. If you get to the fork, take the right. I'm glad you did." Earl asked him what was on the left fork. Parsley said he did not know exactly and had no intention of finding out. He said someone before him had told him the same thing he had told Earl, and that he had passed it on as he had received it, as a rule, not an explanation. Earl asked him how long the sign had been there. Parsley said as long as he could remember, which was a long time. Earl contacted a county surveyor the following week. He described the route he had driven and asked whether a road could physically connect the service road entrance to the location where he had exited, 6 miles north, across 2 ridgelines and a drainage hollow. The surveyor reviewed the topographic maps. He said no such road could exist at the distances Earl described without a minimum of 8 miles of road surface, significant elevation change requiring switchbacks, and a creek crossing with a proper structure. He said the terrain did not permit a 6-minute drive between those 2 points under any conditions. Earl showed him the odometer log he had started keeping after the event, a small notebook where he wrote down his entry reading and his exit reading every time he drove the service road. The surveyor looked at it and did not say anything useful. A week later, at Earl's request, the surveyor pulled an aerial survey from 1947. It was a county-wide survey, the kind conducted from a small plane with a mounted camera, the images stitched together into a rough but readable map. The surveyor found the service road clearly on the image, the 2-mile road, the correct grade, the wooden bridge at the midpoint. And on the hillside running north from the service road's midpoint, following a route that roughly corresponded to what Earl had described, there was a faint trace. A line in the hillside that was slightly too regular to be natural, slightly too consistent to be a drainage feature. The kind of mark an old road leaves in the landscape long after it has been abandoned. The compression of the surface, the changed drainage pattern, the slower regrowth of vegetation along the track. The surveyor said it appeared to be a very old private road, pre-county records, possibly a logging road from the early part of the century, completely overgrown and impassable. No vehicle had used it in living memory. Earl looked at the 1947 image for a long time. The trace on the hillside went north from the midpoint, crossed the ridge, descended into the drainage hollow, and disappeared into the edge of the photograph. It went in the direction he had driven. It went roughly the right distance. A road that no county record acknowledged. A road that no living person had driven. A sign on a post that had been standing long enough for parsley to have grown old alongside it, warning anyone who found the fork to take the right. Earl drove the service road for 30 more years after that night. He checked the odometer every time he went in and every time he came out. He never again found the grade wrong, never found the concrete bridge, never found the fork. The road behaved exactly as a 2-mile gravel service road between 2 county routes should behave. He said at the community meeting that he did not have an explanation. He said he had stopped looking for one after the surveyor showed him the 1947 image, because that image was the closest thing to an answer he was going to find, and it raised more questions than it resolved. A road that existed in 1947 as a faint trace, already long abandoned, had somehow been drivable on a Tuesday night in October. Drivable and signed, and going somewhere that the left fork of it went. Somewhere that Parsley had been warned about and had warned others about without ever finding out what it was. What Earl said, at the end of his account, was the thing that has stayed with the people who heard him tell it. He said, "I think about the sign sometimes, about who put it there, about how long it had been standing before I found it, about whether it was put there for everyone who found the fork, or whether it was put there for someone specific. And then I think about the right fork, and where it took me, and the fact that I came out on a road I knew." He paused. He said, "I've never been certain whether the right fork was safe. I've only ever been certain that I came out." Some accounts are about roads that go wrong in the dark. One account is about a room that a ranger found inside a cabin, a room that could not exist based on the building's exterior, and a window in that room that looked out onto a wall that had no window in it. The following account comes from 2 sources that corroborate each other in every significant detail. The first is a welfare check report filed by Ranger Constance Briggs with her district office in the spring of 3 years ago. The second is a personal written account that Constance submitted to a ranger support organization approximately 2 years after the event. The personal account is longer and contains details that do not appear in the official report. Where the two accounts differ, the difference is noted. Where they agree exactly. The cabin in question was condemned by the county building inspector 4 months after Constance's visit. The property owner disputed the welfare check findings. The cabin is still standing. Constance Briggs had been a ranger for 7 years when she received the welfare check assignment. 7 years is long enough to have done this kind of work before, driving out to a remote property to confirm that someone is alive and functional, completing a visual assessment, filing a report. It is not glamorous work, and it is occasionally uncomfortable, but it is rarely frightening. Constance had done 11 welfare checks in her career before this one. She described all 11 as unremarkable. The subject of the check was a man named Gary Pruitt, 58 years old, who had rented a remote cabin on private land adjacent to park property for what was supposed to be a 10-day solo trip. He was 5 days in when his family called the district. They had not heard from him since the first day, which was not unusual given the area's cell service, but 5 days of silence was long enough that they wanted someone to drive out and look. The local sheriff's office said the property was outside their immediate jurisdiction and suggested the Park Service, which had welfare authority in the area. Constance drew the assignment. The cabin was accessed by a 2-mile gravel drive off a county road. She had the address and a hand-drawn map from the property owner, who she had reached by phone the morning of the visit. He confirmed the cabin's location, described the drive, and told her the key was under the mat if she needed access. He did not ask her why she was going. She noted that in her personal account. The drive-in was slow. The gravel was rutted from recent rain, and the lane was narrow enough that branches brushed both mirrors. The trees closed in completely overhead for the last quarter mile, the kind of canopy that makes afternoon feel like dusk. She came out into a small clearing, and the cabin was there, a single-story wood-frame structure facing south, a covered porch running the full front width, one lamp burning in the window to the left of the door. She sat in her truck for a moment and ran through her visual exterior check before getting out. Standard practice. She was looking for obvious signs of distress: broken windows, open doors that should be closed, smoke from a chimney with no movement inside, a vehicle positioned strangely. Nothing flagged. Gary Pruitt's truck was parked beside the cabin, level and dry. The porch was tidy. The lamp in the window was steady. She walked the exterior before knocking. Porch on the south face. 2 chairs, a small table, boots beside the door, a folded jacket on the railing. She moved to the east wall. Wood siding, 1 window on the near end, weathered but intact. She moved to the north wall. Wood siding, unbroken, no windows. She moved to the west wall. Wood siding, the propane tank mounted against the base, a utility box above it. 1 story, 4 exterior walls. Windows on the south face flanking the door, 1 on the east end. No windows on the north or west. She went back to the front and knocked. Gary Pruitt answered in the time it takes a person to put down whatever they are holding and walk to a door. He was dressed, alert, unhurried. He looked healthy. He said he had been there the whole time, that his phone had died on the second day and he did not have a charger, that he had been reading and sleeping and walking the property, and was sorry his family had worried. He said it the way a sensible person says it, with mild embarrassment, without defensiveness. She explained the welfare check procedure and asked if she could do a visual interior assessment from the doorway, which was the standard request. He stepped back from the door and gestured inside. She looked at what she could see from the threshold. Main room directly ahead, a couch, a wood stove with a fire going low, a bookshelf, a lamp on a side table that matched the light she had seen from outside. To the left, through an open door, the visible portion of a kitchen. At the back of the main room, a closed door that would logically be the bedroom. 3 rooms. It matched the exterior. Then she saw the 4th door. It was on the back wall of the main room, to the right of the bedroom door. Painted the same color as the wall, not hidden, not disguised, but easy to miss if you were not looking for it. The way a door becomes invisible when it matches its surroundings exactly. It was a standard interior door, closed. She would not have noticed it at all except that Gary had stepped back and to the left when he opened the front door, and the angle of his movement had drawn her eye across the back wall. She looked at the exterior in her memory. South face, 2 windows flanking the door, nothing else. East end, 1 window. North wall, no windows. West wall, no windows. A 4th interior room, on the back wall of the main room, would need to occupy space that corresponded to the north wall. The wall with no windows and no exterior features. The cabin's footprint, based on what she had walked, could not accommodate a full room behind that wall without extending past the exterior. She told herself it was a large closet, a bathroom addition, a storage alcove. Old cabins in this part of the country accumulated additions and modifications across decades without any consistent logic. She had been in cabins with rooms that made no architectural sense and turned out to be perfectly ordinary. She asked Gary about the door. She kept her voice even and incidental, the way you ask about something you are curious about but not concerned by. He glanced at it. He said, "Storage. I haven't opened it." His voice was even. Nothing in his posture changed. But when he looked at the door, there was something in the quality of his attention, a very brief flatness, like a shutter closing, that she noticed and did not mention. She asked if she could do a full interior check. It was within her authority for a welfare check, and she framed it as routine. He said yes without hesitating, though she noted the single beat before the yes, barely perceptible, the length of a breath. She checked the kitchen, ordinary, dishes drying on a rack, a coffee cup on the counter, food on the shelf. She checked the bedroom, bed made, bag open on the floor, a book on the nightstand. She went to the 4th door. She turned the handle and opened it. It was a room. Not a closet, not an alcove. A full room, approximately 12 feet square. A single cot against the far wall with a bare mattress. A wooden chair beside the cot. And on the north wall, a window. A standard single-pane window, framed in wood, looking out onto what appeared to be the forest beyond the cabin. She could see trees. She could see the ground outside. The window appeared to function exactly as a window should. She crossed the room and stood at the window and looked out. Trees. Forest floor. The ordinary view from a north-facing window at the back of a rural cabin. She went back outside. She walked the north wall. No window. She stood in front of the north wall in the thin afternoon light and looked at it from one end to the other. Unbroken wood siding. No frame, no glass, no trim, no gap. The wall was exactly as she had observed it on her initial walk. There was no window in it. She went back inside and finished the check. She thanked Gary Pruitt and told him his family would be relieved to hear he was well. She walked to her truck. She sat in it at the end of the 2-mile drive, at the junction with the county road, and she wrote her notes. She wrote, "Renter appears well. Cabin contains 4 rooms. One room's window does not appear on exterior." She looked at what she had written. Then she looked back down the lane toward where the cabin sat, invisible in the trees, the lamp still burning in the south window. Gary Pruitt still inside with the fourth door that he said he had not opened. She started the truck. She did not look back. She ran the property records that evening from the ranger station computer. It took her 20 minutes to find the right filing, the cabin's address pulling up a building permit from decades earlier, the kind of sparse documentation that old rural properties accumulate. A permit number, a date, a listed square footage, a signature from a county official who had likely been retired for years. The permitted interior square footage was 680 feet. 3 rooms, main room, kitchen, bedroom. She did the math twice. A 12 by 12 room adds 144 square feet. The room she had walked into that afternoon was not in the permit. It had never been permitted. Unpermitted additions in old mountain cabins were common enough that this alone meant nothing definitive. But it was another thing that did not fit. She called the property owner the next morning. She explained what she had found: the 4th room, the window discrepancy, the square footage difference. She described the room carefully: cot, chair, window on the north wall. The owner listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "That cabin has always had 3 rooms. There's always been a 4th door in the main room, but it opens to the east side exterior. It's an exterior door. There's a small covered porch on the east side, enclosed with lattice. That's what you're looking at." He said it plainly, without agitation. He was describing a feature of his property that he knew well. She explained again what she had found: a full interior room, a cot, a chair, a north-facing window. She had walked into it. She had stood in it. She had crossed to the window and looked through it. He said he did not know what to tell her. He said the cabin had 3 rooms. He said the door on the back wall of the main room opened to the east exterior porch. He said it as if he were describing something he had described many times before, with the patience of someone who has learned not to argue, but also not to concede. She drove back to the cabin 2 days later. She brought a second ranger, a man named Pierce, who had been with the district for 12 years, and who she trusted to observe carefully and say exactly what he saw. Gary Pruitt had checked out on schedule. The cabin was empty and locked. The property owner had given her permission to access the exterior for the inspection. She walked Pierce around the cabin before they went inside. South face, north wall, east end, west wall. She pointed out the windows. She pointed out the north wall's unbroken siding. She pointed out the east end's single window. Pierce noted everything and said nothing until they had completed the full exterior circuit. He said, "There's no north window." She unlocked the cabin with the key from under the mat. The 4th door was there, on the back wall of the main room, in the same position. She opened it. Pierce walked in behind her. The room was there. Cot, chair, north-facing window. Pierce went to the window and stood at it and looked out. He described what he saw: trees, forest floor, the natural ground cover of a north-facing slope. A normal view through a normal window. They went outside and walked the north wall together. No window. Unbroken siding from one corner to the other. Pierce photographed both. He was methodical about it. Interior photograph from inside the room. Camera aimed at the north wall and the window in it. The trees visible through the glass. Exterior photograph from outside. Camera aimed at the same section of wall from the other side. The siding continuous and uninterrupted. He checked the images on the camera screen while they were still standing at the north wall. He showed her the screen without saying anything. She looked at both photographs. She did not say anything either. They found the east wall exterior porch exactly as the property owner had described it. a weathered exterior door on the east wall, a padlock hasp with an open padlock, the door opening outward onto a small, lattice-enclosed porch. The porch was real. The exterior door was real. It was not what she had entered through. It was not the same door. Inside the cabin, both doors were visible from the main room, the fourth door on the back wall leading to the interior room, and the east door visible at an angle through the kitchen. Two different doors. The property owner had described one of them. She had been inside the other. The property owner was contacted again, this time with Pierce's account included. He said he did not know what they had found. He said he would contest the welfare check findings. He said the cabin had 3 rooms and he had owned it for 22 years, and he knew every wall of it. Constance filed an amended report. The cabin was referred to the county building inspector within the week. The inspector drove out and conducted a full assessment. His report noted structural inconsistencies throughout. The square footage of the interior spaces did not correspond to the exterior measurements when calculated from the outside. He listed this as a significant finding. He recommended the structure not be occupied. He also photographed the 4th room. He had the same experience they had. Interior photograph showing a north window with a forest view. Exterior photograph showing an unbroken north wall. His report attributed the discrepancy to a possible optical illusion created by a framed reflective surface positioned to simulate a window view. He recommended the room not be used. He stopped short of explaining what reflective surface would show living trees moving in a light wind, or how a mirror produces a view of ground cover that changes with the angle of observation. The cabin was condemned 4 months after Constance's visit. The condemnation order cited unpermitted construction and the structural measurement inconsistencies from the inspector's report. The property owner appealed. The appeal was still pending at the time these accounts were compiled. She called Gary Pruitt as part of her standard welfare check follow-up. He was home, fine, back to his regular life. She asked him, carefully, about the 4th room. She asked whether he had gone in during his stay. He paused. She counted the pause. It was longer than the natural pause before a simple no. He said, "I didn't go in there." His voice was even. He did not ask which room she meant. She believed him. She told the support organization she believed him because his voice had the specific quality of a person telling the truth about a choice they had made rather than a person denying something they had done. He had not gone in. He had chosen not to go in. The distinction felt important to her, though she could not fully articulate why. What she could articulate, and what she included at the end of her personal account, was the detail that had stayed with her. When she and Pierce had been in the 4th room, she had looked at the cot. The mattress was bare, no sheets, no blanket, nothing on it. But the surface of the mattress held a depression, the kind of depression a mattress holds after someone has been lying on it for an extended period. Not the permanent deformation of a heavily used mattress, but the temporary impression of recent occupation, the kind that fades within a day or two if nothing continues to use it. The rest of the cabin had a week's worth of undisturbed dust on surfaces Gary had not touched. The 4th room had no dust anywhere. Not on the chair, not on the cot frame, not on the floor, not on the windowsill. Whatever had been using that room had been using it recently, and it had been tidy about it. Constance still does welfare checks. She still drives out to remote properties and confirms that renters are alive and well and not in need of assistance. What has changed, without her deciding to change it, is that she walks the full exterior of every structure before she knocks. She counts the windows from outside first. She makes sure the number matches what she finds inside. She has not gone back to the cabin. She does not intend to. She said in her account that she thinks about Gary Pruitt sometimes, about the pause before he said he hadn't gone in, about the fact that he had been in that cabin for 10 days with a door he had decided not to open, and about what it meant that he had made that decision and held to it. She said she hoped it had kept him safe. She said she was fairly certain it had. She said she was not entirely certain what it had kept him safe from, but that the mattress impression and the clean room together suggested that whatever it was, it had not needed Gary to go in. It had simply needed the room. Some accounts leave questions in buildings. Some leave questions in roads. One left a ranger with a question she has spent years trying not to ask out loud. About a ridge, a whistle, and 3 nights of signals coming from somewhere a person could not have survived. This is the only account in this collection told in the first person. The others came through intermediaries, family members, transcripts, anonymous submissions, second-hand tellings. This one came directly. The narrator identifies herself only as M. She is a backcountry ranger who worked a remote section of national forest in western North Carolina for 9 years. She submitted the account in writing in 2022. She is still employed in the Park Service, in a different district. She has never submitted this account to her district office. She said she wrote it down because she needed somewhere to put it that was not inside her own head anymore. She said to use whatever felt useful. She said to leave out her name. This is what she wrote. The search started on a Thursday evening in October. A day hiker named Sandra Vance had gone out on a loop trail that morning. 7 miles, well marked. A trail I had walked myself probably 40 times, and had not returned by the time the trailhead closed. Another hiker had seen her at the trailhead at 11 in the morning, heading in. She should have been back by 4. Her family called at 7 when she did not answer her phone. By 9, we had 2 teams on the trail, and I was coordinating from the trailhead. That is standard for an overnight search. Keep the coordinator at the base point. Maintain radio contact with both teams, log everything. I had done it before. The weather was clear and cold, good visibility, the kind of October night that makes trail searches easier than they might otherwise be. At 11:30, one of the team members on the north section called in. He had heard a whistle, 3 short blasts, the standard distress signal. He marked the location and the direction, and I sent the team toward the sound. They swept the area for 40 minutes and found nothing. The location he had marked was a steep, densely wooded section of the trail at approximately 3,800 feet. The temperature up there was already below freezing. Sandra Vance had been described by her family as wearing light layers, a fleece, a windbreaker, trail pants. Not gear for a night at that elevation. I noted the whistle call in the log and moved on. Ridges play tricks with sound. I had worked enough night searches to know that a whistle heard once from one location, on a ridge in the dark, does not tell you much about where the person actually is. At 1:15 in the morning, I heard it myself. I was standing at the edge of the trailhead parking lot, maybe 20 feet from the tree line, doing a radio check with both teams. The teams were each more than a mile in. The lot was empty except for my truck and the 2 team vehicles. There were a couple of those low-sodium parking lot lights that give you a yellow circle, and not much else. Beyond the yellow circles, the forest was completely dark. 3 short blasts. From the northeast, from up high, from the ridge, from the area above where the north team had already swept. I radioed both teams immediately. Neither had heard it. The north team was positioned on the west side of the ridge at that point, which would have put them in a sound shadow relative to the northeast face. The south team was too far in the other direction. The fact that neither of them heard what I heard from the parking lot did not tell me much. It told me the sound had come from a specific angle that only my position could receive cleanly. I marked the time, marked the direction, marked it in the log. I did not mark how the sound made me feel, which was a specific, focused unease that I had not felt on a search before. Not fear, exactly. More like the feeling of a detail that does not belong in the category you have placed it in, and you have not yet figured out which category is correct. At 1:16, I turned my headlights on and left them on. I did not make a decision to do that. I just did it. The search continued through the night. The two teams completed their sweeps of the assigned sections and found no trace of Sandra Vance. We were operating on the probability that she had stopped somewhere off-trail, a flat area, a sheltered spot, somewhere she had felt safe enough to wait out the dark. People make that decision on trails more often than the statistics suggest they should. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes it does not. At 2:40, the whistle again. Northeast, same direction, 3 short blasts. I was facing the radio when it came. I turned toward the sound. The parking lot lights gave me the lot and the tree line, and nothing past it. The ridge was invisible above the trees, a darker mass against a dark sky. I stood and listened for a long time after the 3 blasts faded, longer than I needed to for logging purposes. I was listening for a 4th sound. Nothing came. I logged it. Marked the time, 2:40, same as the previous call if you counted from the first team's report at 11:30. 3 calls, evenly spaced, same direction, same duration. I did not write that observation in the official log. I wrote it in the small notebook I carry in my left breast pocket. The one I use for notes I am not ready to make official yet. The north team, repositioned by then on the northeast face, heard the 2:40 call clearly. They moved toward it and found nothing. The same steep, frozen section of trail, the same impossibility of an unequipped hiker surviving there through the night. They noted ice on the trail surface. They noted that the sound, when they heard it, appeared to come from somewhere above them on the ridge, from a section that was not accessible by any marked trail. I sent them back. I told them to hold their position and wait for first light. Before first light, at approximately 4 in the morning, sitting in my truck with the windows up, I turned over what I had. 3 whistle calls. Consistent schedule. Consistent direction. Location acoustically impossible for an unequipped day hiker to occupy in those conditions. 2 independent hearing events, the North team at 11:30, both myself and the repositioned North team member at 2:40. Not a single observer anomaly, not fatigue or suggestion. 2 separate positions, 2 separate confirmations. I had been on searches where the subject was found in places they should not have been able to reach. People in distress do surprising things. I knew this. I tried to hold on to it. At 5:50, the Dawn team reached the northeast ridge outcrop. The rocky section at the top, exposed, frost-covered, approximately 4,200 feet. I had them on the radio as they climbed. I heard them moving, heard the team leaders' breathing change with the grade, heard the specific sound of boots on frozen rock. Then the team leader stopped mid-sentence. There was a pause. Not static, not interference. A held silence that had a quality I had never heard on a search radio before. Then he said, "M, there's a whistle here, on the ground, just sitting on the rock." I asked him to describe it. He described it. Orange plastic, small cylindrical type, standard emergency issue. A name written on the side in black marker. I asked him to read the name. He read it, Sandra Vance. I stood in the parking lot in the early morning gray with the radio in my hand and the headlights still on behind me. and I looked at the northeast ridge, which I could see now in the first light. A dark line against a pale sky, the rock outcrop just visible at the top as a slightly lighter mass against the tree line. A whistle with Sandra Vance's name on it was sitting on a rock at 4,200 feet. Sandra Vance had not been found. The rock was coated in frost and had been below freezing all night, and no living person in light layers could have placed it there and survived the exposure. I told the team to bag it and document it. I told them to come down. The team leader's voice came back on the radio a few minutes later, steady and professional, the way good searchers keep themselves. He confirmed the whistle was bagged and documented. He confirmed no footprints on the frost-covered rock. The frost was unbroken in every direction around the whistle except for the team's own approach tracks, which were clear and recent. The whistle had been placed, or had arrived, without anyone walking to it. I logged that and did not say anything on the radio that was not procedural. Day 2 began the way searches begin when they have gone through the first night without a find, with the specific tiredness that is not just physical, and with the narrowing of the operational logic that happens when the easy answers have been eliminated. We had swept the trail completely. We had heard distress signals from a location the subject could not have reached. We had found the subject's whistle on a rock at 4,200 feet with no footprints around it. The case for Sandra Vance being anywhere on the marked trail was weaker than it had been at the start. The case for her being in the place the whistle signals were coming from was stronger than any version of events that made sense. The family confirmed the whistle that morning. I called them before 8. Sandra's husband described it exactly. Orange, cylindrical, her name in black marker, the kind she had carried for years on every hike. He could not explain how it could be on the ridge. I told him we were continuing the search and that we would find her. I said it the way you say it when you need it to be true. The district had authorized a third day provisionally, pending a status review at the end of day 2. I spent the daylight hours repositioning teams, widening the grid, checking access points that had not been covered yet. Routine search management. I did the work, and I kept the log, and I did not think about the whistle more than I needed to in order to function. In the late afternoon, before the teams came back for the night, a volunteer searcher found me at the trailhead. His name was Crawford. He was a retired man who had been doing trail maintenance and volunteer search work in this area for 30 years, the kind of person who knows the land better than any map, and who shows up without being asked because he understands what a search requires. He had been with the South team during the day. He had found nothing, as had everyone else. He came to stand beside me at the hood of my truck where I had my maps spread out. He looked at the maps for a moment. Then he looked at the ridge. He said it quietly and without preamble, the way people who know a thing say it when they have decided the time is right. He said, "Whatever's on that ridge calling at night, you don't call back to it. You don't blow your whistle up toward it. You mark the time and you wait. That's all." I asked him if he had worked searches on this ridge before. He said he had. He looked at the northeast face for a moment, the way a person looks at something they have looked at many times and have not yet finished looking at. I asked him what he thought it was. He said he didn't think naming it helped anything. He said marking the time and waiting was the only thing that had ever seemed like the right response. He said it like a rule he had arrived at through experience rather than theory. He went home before dark. I watched his truck pull out of the lot, and then I turned back to the ridge and thought about what he had said. I did not blow a whistle. I marked the times in my notebook and I waited. Night 2. I had one additional team member at the trailhead with me, a ranger named Terrell who had come up from the South District to help with the coordination. Good man, experienced, calm. We set up at the lot with hot coffee from a thermos he had brought, and we waited. 11:30. 3 short blasts from the northeast ridge. Terrell heard them. I heard them. We both marked the time simultaneously without looking at each other, which told me we had heard the same thing at the same moment. He logged it. I logged it. We waited. 1:15, 3 short blasts, same direction, same duration. We both heard it. I was looking at the ridge when it came, or looking at the dark where the ridge was, which is not the same as seeing anything. I listened until the 3rd blast faded, and then I kept listening for a moment past the silence. 2:40, 3 short blasts, the same, exactly the same. The spacing between the blasts identical to what I had heard the previous night. The duration of each blast identical, the silence between them identical. Terrell was turned toward his log, writing the time, when the 3rd blast came and then continued, a 4th blast, long, single, sustained for approximately 3 seconds and then stopping cleanly. Terrell did not hear it. He was writing. He looked up after it was over and asked if there had been a 4th. I told him I wasn't sure. I said it might have been an echo. I wrote it in my notebook. I did not write it in the official log. What I wrote in my notebook was this: 4 blasts at 2:40. 4th blast long, single, sustained. Terrell did not hear. Not a distress variation, not a standard signal. Direction identical to previous calls. The 4th blast was not for the search. I don't know who it was for. I think it was for me. I cannot explain why I thought that. I can only say that the 4th blast had a quality the first 3 did not. Not louder, not closer, but directed. The way a sentence directed at one specific person in a group feels different from a sentence addressed to the room. I had never experienced sound that way before. I have not experienced it since. I did not transmit, I did not respond. I stood in the parking lot and I held the radio and I let the silence after the 4th blast be complete. Crawford had said to mark the time and wait. That was all I did. I did not sleep that night. I sat in my truck with the windows up after Terrell went to his vehicle to rest, and I watched the ridge and I thought about the schedule. 11:30, 1:15, 2:40, 3 calls, spaced at approximately 105-minute intervals, consistent across 2 nights. A person in distress does not maintain a schedule that precise. A person in distress blows a whistle as often as they have breath for it, or they blow it in response to sounds they hear from searchers, or they blow it randomly as hope and desperation dictate. They do not blow it at 105-minute intervals for 2 consecutive nights from a location no living person could occupy in freezing temperatures. I did not write that analysis in the official log either. At approximately 6 in the morning, I started my truck. I was going to drive to the station and get coffee and come back before the teams assembled. I put the truck in reverse. I checked the mirrors. Something tapped the roof of the truck. Once. A single tap from above with the specific weight and resonance of a finger. Not a branch, not debris, not a bird. A deliberate tap, the way you tap on a car window to get the driver's attention. From above, from the roof, in a parking lot with no trees close enough to reach it. I did not get out of the truck. I put it back in park. I sat for a long time. Then I drove to the gas station in town, 6 miles down the mountain, and I parked in the lot and I drank the worst coffee I have ever tasted, and I watched the sky get light, and I did not go back up until it was fully morning, and I was certain it was fully morning. I have thought about the tap many times since, about what it meant, if it meant anything, about whether it was a response to my sitting there all night without answering, about whether not answering was the right thing, or whether it made no difference either way. What I keep coming back to is Crawford's rule. Mark the time and wait. He had not said what you were waiting for. He had not said what happened when the waiting was over. He had just said that was all. I had marked the time. I had waited. Day 3 was coming, and Sandra Vance had not been found, and the whistle on the rock had her name on it, and something on the ridge had blown a 4th blast at 2:40 in the morning that Terrell had not heard. And I was drinking bad coffee at a gas station at dawn because something had tapped my truck roof in an empty parking lot. And I had been alone, and I had not gotten out. There was a reason I had not gotten out. I understood the reason. I was less certain about what it was protecting me from. Day 3 started with the district supervisor driving up from the main office. His name was Alderman, and he had the particular composure of someone who manages difficult situations by reducing them to their operational components and addressing those components in order. He was not cold, exactly. He was contained. He looked at my logs, looked at the search grid, looked at the weather forecast and said what the numbers said, that we were entering the window where the probability of a live find decreases significantly for an unequipped subject in these conditions. He said it carefully, which I appreciated. He did not say anything about the whistle calls. He had the log in front of him and he could see the entries. He looked at the spacing, 11:30, 1:15, 2:40, and I watched him notice it. He did not say anything about it to me directly, but I heard him say something quietly to a second ranger who had come up with him, something about the intervals being mechanical, too regular for a person in distress. He said it like an observation he was working through rather than a conclusion he had reached. Then he moved on to the operational review and did not return to it. He recommended scaling the search to recovery protocol. He said it with appropriate gravity. He said it was a recommendation, not a decision, and that as the coordinating ranger on the ground, I could make the case for continuing active search if I had supporting evidence. I told him about the whistle on the rock. He had read the log entry, but I told him again, in person, with the detail that does not fully transmit in written form, the unbroken frost around it, the absence of footprints, the fact that it was placed rather than dropped. He listened. He did not dismiss it. I told him the whistle calls were on a consistent schedule across 2 nights, corroborated by multiple observers, originating from a location the subject could not physically occupy. I told him that represented an ongoing signal that we had not explained and had not located the source of. He said he would authorize one more night watch with a reduced team. He said he would come back in the morning for a final assessment. He drove back down the mountain and I spent the rest of the day running the expanded grid with the teams, checking access points, covering ground that had not been covered yet. We found nothing. By late afternoon, the search had taken on the specific quiet of its 3rd day. The teams were professional, and they did not show their tiredness, but it was there, in the way they moved and the way they logged and the way they answered radio calls with slightly less cadence than they had at the start. I felt it too. I had not slept in 2 days in any meaningful sense. I had eaten what was available at the trailhead and drunk too much coffee and not enough water, and I was functioning on the specific alertness that comes when the body understands sleep is not an option and adjusts accordingly. Crawford came back in the afternoon. He had been on the trail since morning, and he reported nothing, same as everyone. Before he left, he found me at the trailhead again. He asked how the nights had been. I told him what I could tell him: the consistent schedule, the 2-night pattern, the 4th blast on the 2nd night that Terrell had not heard. He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "You didn't answer it." I said no. He nodded. He said that was right. He said it the way you confirm something you already believed but wanted to hear confirmed. He drove out before dark again. I watched him go and thought about asking him to stay, and decided not to. Crawford's knowledge of this ridge was practical and earned, and I trusted it. But I did not think his presence at the trailhead overnight would change what happened on the ridge, and I did not want to make him responsible for whatever the night produced. Terrell was back at the trailhead. Reduced team, as Alderman had authorized, just the two of us at the base, one team of 2 on the trail. Quiet night, cold. The parking lot lights doing their usual poor job of illuminating anything beyond themselves. 11:30, 3 short blasts from the northeast ridge. Terrell marked it. I marked it. We waited. 1:15. 3 short blasts. I had my binoculars out by then. I was watching the rock outcrop at the top of the ridge, which was visible in the partial moonlight. A pale mass against the dark sky, the frost on it catching the light faintly. When the blasts came, I was watching the rock. There was a shape at the edge of the outcrop. I want to be careful about what I say here because I'm aware of what 2 nights without sleep does to visual processing, and I'm aware of how much the mind will construct from partial information when it is looking for something. I know all of this. I have thought about it many times since. But I was looking at the rock, and the blasts came, and there was a shape at the edge of the outcrop that had not been there before the blasts began. Not clearly defined, not a figure I could describe in detail, not something I could put specific dimensions on. A shape that was consistent with a person standing at the edge of a rock. Present during the call. Gone when the call stopped. I did not tell Terrell. I waited. 2:40. The blasts came. I put the binoculars up immediately. The shape was there again, at the edge of the rock, in the same position. 3 blasts. The shape present for each of them. Terrell was logging. The 4th blast came. I felt it before I heard it. The specific held attention of something directed at one person in particular. Long, single, sustained. The same as the night before. Terrell looked up. He asked if there had been a 4th. I lowered the binoculars. The shape was gone from the rock. I told him I wasn't sure. Same thing I had said the night before. Same answer. What I did not tell him was what I had seen at the edge of the rock during the calls. What I did not tell him was that the shape had been present for every blast and absent in the silence between them, as if the blasts and the shape were connected, as if whatever was making the sound and whatever was standing at the edge of the rock were the same thing, and it was only present when it was speaking. I picked up my radio. I was going to call the trail team, have them log the visual observation, start building a formal record of it. My thumb was on the transmit button. I did not transmit. I put the radio down. I do not have a complete explanation for why I made that choice in that moment. I know that Crawford had said to mark the time and wait. I know that sending the trail team up to the outcrop at 2:40 in the morning, towards something that had been signaling for 3 nights from a location no person could survive, felt like the wrong move in a way I could not articulate but could not ignore. I know that I had heard a tap on the roof of my truck the previous morning from above an empty parking lot, and that I had not gotten out, and that choice had felt correct too. I marked the time. I waited. At 4:10 in the morning, my personal cell phone rang. I had 1 bar of service, which was unusual for that location at that hour. The number on the screen was Sandra Vance's cell number. I had it in my contacts from the family intake on day 1. I stared at it for 2 rings, then I answered. Static for a moment. Then a woman's voice, clear enough to understand, slightly flattened the way voices sound on a poor connection. She said, "I'm at the parking lot." I turned around. The parking lot was empty. My truck, Terrell's vehicle, the sodium lights making their yellow circles on the asphalt. nothing else. I walked the full lot. I walked the tree line at the edge. I went to Terrell, who was 50 feet away, and asked if anyone had come in. He said no. He had been watching the entrance the whole time. No vehicle had entered the lot. No one had walked in. I looked at my phone. The call showed a duration of 14 seconds. The number was Sandra Vance's. Sandra Vance's phone had died on day 1 of her hike. Her family had confirmed this when we asked about contact attempts. The phone had been off since before the search began. I stood in the parking lot at 4:10 in the morning with my phone in my hand, and Terrell looking at me from 50 feet away, and the ridge dark and silent above the trees. And I thought about what I had just heard. A voice that sounded like a woman, using a phone that was off, saying she was in a parking lot that was empty. I did not call the number back. At 6:15, my radio produced a call from a trail crew working a trailhead on the other side of the mountain, 15 miles from where I was standing, on the far side of 2 ridgelines. One of the crew members had found a woman sitting on the tailgate of their work truck in their parking lot. She said her name was Sandra Vance. She said she had been trying to get home. She did not appear injured. I stood there for a moment with the radio. Then I got in my truck and I drove. She was sitting on the tailgate exactly as the trail crew had described, wrapped in a jacket one of them had given her, a paper cup of something hot in both hands, her boots muddy at the toe and clean at the heel the way boots get when someone has been walking on wet ground and then on dry. She looked tired in the specific way that people look tired when they have been frightened and the fright has passed and the body is presenting the bill. But she was alert. Her eyes were clear. She tracked me when I walked toward her and she said my name, my first name, which surprised me because I had not introduced myself yet. I asked her how she knew my name, and she said one of the trail crew had told her the coordinator was coming. I did not ask which one. It was a reasonable explanation. I let it go. I sat beside her on the tailgate and I started the debrief the way I always start them, from the beginning, from the moment she had left the trailhead, moving forward in order. She was cooperative and clear. She said she had become disoriented on the back half of the loop, in the section where the trail crosses a series of rocky switchbacks and the markers get sparse. She had left the trail looking for a better view of her position and had not been able to locate the trail again before the light failed. She had found a flat area off-trail, sheltered on 2 sides by rock, and she had stopped there because moving in the dark on unfamiliar terrain was more dangerous than staying put. This was correct. This was exactly what we tell hikers to do. She said she had stayed in that spot. She said the nights were cold, but she had stayed moving enough to keep her temperature up. She said she had slept during the days, which was why she had not heard the search teams, and had been awake at night, which was why she had seen enough light by the 4th morning to orient herself toward the sound of a road. I asked about the whistle. She reached into her coat pocket and took it out and held it in her palm. Orange, cylindrical, her name in black marker on the side. I told her we had found a whistle on the ridge. I told her it had her name on it. I showed her the photograph on my phone, the image the Dawn team had sent me on day 1. The whistle sitting on the frost-covered rock at 4,200 feet, the unbroken frost around it, nothing else in the frame. She looked at the photograph for a long time. Then she looked at the whistle in her hand. She said, "That's not my whistle." I looked at the photograph. I looked at the whistle in her hand. Orange, cylindrical, her name in black marker. The same type, the same size, the same handwriting style and the name label. I told her the evidence whistle matched the description her husband had given us. She said her husband had never seen any whistle except the one she was holding, which she had bought 6 years ago at an outfitter in Asheville, and had carried on every hike since. She said she had never had a duplicate made. She said she had never lost it and never lent it. 2 whistles, both real, both with Sandra Vance's name in black marker. One found at 4,200 feet on a rock coated in unbroken frost. One in the coat pocket of a woman who said she had never blown it because she had been afraid of drawing wildlife attention in the dark. She said she had never blown it. I thought about the 3-night schedule: 11:30, 1:15, 2:40. I thought about the 4th blast on nights 2 and 3 that only I had heard. I thought about what a whistle sounds like when it is blown by something that is not a person. Whether that distinction even had meaning in a framework that could account for any of this. I did not ask her about the phone call. I had her number in my contacts from day 1. The call at 4:10 in the morning had come from that number. Her phone had been dead since day 1. These were facts that did not fit any version of events that I could construct, and I did not think asking her about them would produce anything useful. I wrote the discrepancy in my notebook and left it there. She was medically cleared at the hospital. Dehydration, mild hypothermia, no injuries. Her family came and took her home. The search operation was officially closed that afternoon. I filed the after-action report that evening at the station, with the particular flatness that comes at the end of a search that has been resolved in the best possible way and has left you with more questions than you started with. The after-action report noted the whistle found on the ridge as unidentified property, collected as evidence. It noted the distress signals heard by multiple observers on multiple nights. It did not note the scheduling pattern. It did not note the 4th blast. It did not note the phone call at 4:10. The report said what the facts it included supported: that a missing hiker had been found alive and well, that the search had been conducted according to protocol, that no injuries had been sustained by search personnel. All of that was true. It was not the whole truth, but I was not certain what the whole truth was, and a formal report is not the place for things you cannot verify. I called Crawford the following week. I told him Sandra had been found safe. I told him about the 2 whistles, described them both, told him they were identical and that Sandra denied knowing about or owning the one found on the ridge. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Did she say whether it called her name?" I held the phone and thought about that question. Sandra had not mentioned her name being called. I had not mentioned it either. It was not something I had experienced. The whistle calls had been the standard 3-blast signal, not a voice, not a name. And yet Crawford's question assumed that the thing on the ridge was capable of calling a name, that it had done so in previous searches or previous encounters on this ridge, that calling the name was a feature of what this thing did. I asked him what he meant. He said, "I'm glad she's home." He said it sincerely, with the relief of someone who has seen outcomes that were less good. He did not answer my question. I did not ask again. I submitted the transfer request the following spring. The new district approved it in 3 weeks. I drove out of that district on a Tuesday morning in April, and I did not stop at the trailhead on my way through, though I passed within a quarter mile of it. I thought about stopping. I kept driving. I still coordinate searches. I still do night watches when the assignment calls for it. What has changed is this. I do not work a night watch alone anymore. I mark the time whenever I hear a whistle in the backcountry, even on ordinary days, even when I know the source. I do not respond to whistle calls after dark until I have visual confirmation of the person blowing them. These are not rules I wrote down. They are things my body decided without consulting me, in the weeks after the search, the way the body encodes certain kinds of knowledge that the mind has not fully processed. 3 months after the search closed, a piece of mail arrived at the ranger station, addressed to me by name, at the station address, in handwriting I did not recognize. No return address. Postmarked from the county where the search had taken place. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of plain paper, folded once. On the paper, in the same careful handwriting as the envelope, were 4 lines. 11:30, 1:15, 2:40, 4:10. Nothing else. No message, no name. No explanation of why the times had been written down, or who had written them, or how anyone outside the official search log, which I had not shared, knew that 4:10 was the time that mattered. The official log showed the trail crew's call at 6:15. It did not show a call at 4:10. I had not written 4:10 anywhere except my personal notebook, which had not left my possession. I put the envelope in the folder where I keep the photograph of the whistle on the rock. The photograph and the envelope are in a manila folder in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet in my home office. I have not opened the drawer in 2 years, but I know exactly where it is. I have always known exactly where it is. That is the thing about certain kinds of knowledge. It does not go away because you stop looking at it. It sits in the bottom drawer and it waits, and you know it is there, and that is its own kind of communication. I don't know what was on that ridge. I don't know what made those calls. I don't know how a whistle with Sandra Vance's name on it arrived at 4,200 feet without footprints and without a person to carry it. I don't know whose voice came through her dead phone at 4:10 in the morning to tell me she was in a parking lot that was empty. What I know is what I did. I marked the times. I waited. I did not answer. I did not send anyone up to the rock in the dark. I drove away in the morning, and I did not stop at the trailhead on my way out of the district. I don't know if any of that was the right set of choices. I only know that I came out.